Hello, I'm Ed Bunch, and we're reading from Adam Hamilton's book, Living Unafraid, Day 22, The Storms at Sea. From the book of Matthew, by this time a boat battered by the waves was far from the land, for the wind was against them, and early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Adam Hamilton says, "On my last visit to the Sea of Galilee, a terrible storm woke me up in the middle of the night, with the sound of wind howling through the trees. I stepped outside and tried to imagine how it must have felt when the disciples were caught in such a storm, in the dark in the middle of the lake. It would have been terrifying." There are two distinct episodes in the Gospels that involve Jesus, the disciples, and storms on the Sea of Galilee. In one story, Jesus was in the boat with the disciples, napping, exhausted, when the storm arose. None of them wanted to bother him, but as the storm intensified, they became frightened. Finally, they woke Jesus, crying, "Lord, help us, we're going to drown." Sometimes I wonder what they expected him to do. Man an oar? Help with the sail? Whatever it was, it is clear that they were not expecting him to do what he did. Jesus got up and gave orders to the winds and the lake, and there was a great calm. Can you imagine what that must have been like? In awe, the disciples said to one another, "Who is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him?" But the fishermen among them had a clue. There were certain verses from the Psalms that fishermen clung to when the storms came up. Psalms 65 verse 7, 89 verse 9, and 107 verse 25. Each notes that God calms the storms at sea. The disciples were beginning to see that their teacher was no ordinary man. The second of the storm accounts at sea took place at night, and in this story, Jesus was not in the boat with the disciples. As evening approached, he told them to take the boat and head back to the other side of the lake without him. Normally, it might take an hour for a little boat to cross from one side of the lake to the other. At its widest, the Sea of Galilee is 8 miles from east to west. But as the sun set that evening, the winds picked up and shifted. Soon, the waves were washing over the bow of the boat, tossing it to and fro. It was in the midst of the disciples' struggle that Jesus came to them, climbed into the boat with them, and calmed the wind and the waves. The story was not told merely to entertain or to teach us what Jesus did so long ago. It was intended to teach us that Jesus also comes to us in the middle of our storms. As Jesus approached their boat, walking on the water, they cried out in fear, thinking that he was a ghost. In Mark and John's accounts, Jesus climbs into the boat, and the storm immediately calms. I love this image. When you invite Jesus into the boat with you, the storms of fear and anxiety begin to subside. Matthew adds one detail to the story that Mark and John leave out. While the storm was raging and Jesus was approaching, Simon Peter shouted the most preposterous thing. If it is really you, Jesus, walking on the water, bid me to join you." Had Peter lost his mind? What kind of request was this? Jesus bade Peter to step out of the boat and join him in the sea. You no doubt know the story. Many of us learned it as children. Peter stepped out of the boat and began walking on the water toward Jesus. Remarkable. Then a strong wind came up. Peter took his eyes off of Jesus and he began to sink. He cried out to Jesus, who rescued him. They both climbed into the boat and the storm subsided. Why does Matthew include this part of the story? I think it's because he wants us to see that if we focus on the storm instead of the Lord, fear will take us down. But I think he also wants us to know that at times, Jesus invites you to step out of what's safe, comfortable, and easy to join him on the seas, where the real action is.
Adam Hamilton continues, "As I write these words, a group of men in my congregation are in a Central American country, helping to construct a new wing on a school. Some felt a tinge of anxiety as they left, knowing that the murder rate in this small country is 10 times that of the United States. Yet still they went to bless the children in this community. They are among so many in our church who routinely overcome their fears to serve others in places or ways that are unfamiliar or that evoke a bit of anxiety. Why do they do that? Because they sense Jesus calling them to step outside their comfort zone. Jesus is in the boat with you. Trust him. It's going to be okay. He's more powerful than the storms. But don't miss this. Sometimes he's going to call you to get out of the boat, to leave your comfort zone, taking a risk while keeping your eyes focused on him. And that's where the real adventure begins. Will you pray with me? Lord, help me remember that you are with me in the storms, but also help me hear your call when you bid me to step out of the boat and join you on the water. Help me to keep my eyes fixed on you and to come when you bid me come.